Hashtag the Aegis Protocol, a space battle for humanity's survival. Hashtag Chapter 1. The threat approaches. The emergency klaxons pierce through the bridge of the UES Vanguard like a scream in the darkness. Captain Rachel Sinclair's coffee cup shattered against the deck as the ship lurched violently, red warning lights bathing the command center in an ominous crimson glow. "Report," she barked, her weathered hands gripping the command rail as her bridge crew scrambled to their stations. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures at the edge of the Kepler 186 system, Lieutenant Torres called out, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Captain, it's them. The Karzaki Armada." A collective intake of breath swept across the bridge. The Karzaki, a name that had become synonymous with terror across the Outer Rim colonies. In the past 18 months, they had systematically obliterated 7 star systems, leaving nothing but debris fields and the echoing silence of extinct civilizations in their wake. "How many ships?" Sinclair demanded, though she dreaded the answer. "Initial count shows. God help us, over 300 vessels, including their flagship." Torres's hands trembled as he adjusted his instruments. "Captain, they're deploying the Devastator, that massive dreadnought that wiped out the Centauri defense fleet." Sinclair felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders like a lead shroud. The Devastator was a legend of destruction, a 2-kilometer-long monstrosity that bristled with weapons capable of cracking planets. It had never been defeated in battle. "Time to planetary orbit," she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting in her mind. 47 hours at their current speed," replied Commander Hayes from the tactical station. "The colony on Kepler 186F has 4 million civilians, Captain. The evacuation ships can maybe get half of them out in time." "Half? 2 million souls condemned to die because humanity's greatest military minds had never found a way to stop the Karzaki war machine." Sinclair closed her eyes for a moment, seeing the faces of her own children back on Earth, imagining them trapped on a doomed world while an alien armada approached with the patience of death itself. The Karzaki weren't just conquerors, they were artists of annihilation. They didn't simply destroy civilizations, they dissected them with surgical precision, studying each species' weaknesses before delivering the killing blow. Their technology was decades ahead of humanity's, their tactics flawless, their resolve absolute. "Signal Fleet Command," Sinclair ordered, her decision crystallizing like ice in her veins. "Tell them we're implementing Protocol 7. The bridge fell silent. Protocol 7 was a code phrase that meant only one thing: humanity was about to deploy its most closely guarded secret, a weapon so classified that only 12 people in the entire Colonial Defense Force knew of its existence. "Captain," Hayes whispered, his face pale. "Are you certain? The weapon has never been tested in actual combat conditions." Sinclair turned to face her crew, 37 men and women who had followed her through 3 previous campaigns, who trusted her judgment even when facing impossible odds. Their faces reflected the same mixture of fear and desperate hope that she felt burning in her own chest. "The Karzaki have left us no choice," she said, her voice carrying the weight of command and the burden of species survival. "Either we use Aegis now, or we watch another human colony burn while we run like cowards." Outside the viewports, space seemed to press closer, as if the darkness itself was holding its breath. Somewhere in that vast emptiness, the Karzaki Armada was approaching with the inexorable certainty of a tide, bringing with it the end of everything humanity held dear. The galaxy had seen the Karzaki's handiwork before, entire worlds reduced to molten slag, defense fleets scattered like leaves in a hurricane. But this time would be different. This time, humanity would show the galaxy what desperation could accomplish when backed by human ingenuity and the will to survive. As the Vanguard changed course toward what might be humanity's final battle, Sinclair couldn't shake the feeling that they were sailing toward either salvation or damnation, and she was no longer certain there was a difference between the two. Hashtag Chapter 2, the human response. The war room aboard the Vanguard had become a crucible of desperate strategy. Holographic displays showed the Karzaki Armada's relentless advance, each red dot representing a ship capable of reducing cities to ash. Captain Sinclair stood at the center of it all, her command staff arrayed around the tactical table like generals planning humanity's last stand. "Fleet status report," she commanded, her eyes never leaving the enemy formation. Commander Hayes manipulated the holographic display, highlighting humanity's pathetic response force. "We have 37 ships total, Captain. The Vanguard and 6 other heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 18 frigates. Against their 300. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. Even with humanity's most advanced warships, they were outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. The Karzaki had learned from every previous engagement, adapting their tactics with the cold efficiency of a species that had conquered half the galaxy. "What about the Aegis weapon?" asked Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the project's lead scientist who had been transferred to the fleet just hours earlier. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and the weight of terrible knowledge. "Is the installation complete?" Sinclair nodded grimly. For the past 6 months, humanity's greatest minds have been working in absolute secrecy, converting the Vanguard into something unprecedented, a weapons platform capable of channeling the raw power of a star into a focused beam of annihilation. The Aegis cannon stretched through the ship's entire length, its exotic matter containment fields requiring the output of 3 fusion reactors just to maintain stability. "The weapon is ready," Sinclair confirmed. "But Dr. Chen, I need you to be completely honest with me. What are our chances?" Dr. Chen's hands trembled as she pulled up the weapon specifications. "The theoretical output is beyond anything we've ever achieved. The beam should be capable of punching through any known shielding technology." "But Captain..." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "We've never fired it at full power. The energy requirements are so massive that we'll have to shut down all other systems. Life support, engines, defensive shields, everything." The implications hit the room like a physical blow. They would have one shot, literally one chance to prove that human ingenuity could triumph over overwhelming odds. If they missed, if the weapon failed, if the Karzaki adapted faster than expected, the Vanguard would be defenseless, and humanity's secret weapon would die with them. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his communication station, his face grim. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from the colony. The Karzaki have begun long-range bombardment of the outer settlements. They're using civilian targets for target practice." Sinclair felt rage surge through her veins like molten metal. This was what the Karzaki did, they broke their enemies' will to fight by demonstrating the futility of resistance. They wanted humanity to see their loved ones die, wanted them to understand that defiance only brought greater suffering. "Show me," she commanded. The main screen flickered to life, displaying footage from the colony's surface. Karzaki fighter bombers swept through the atmosphere like mechanical vultures, their plasma cannons turning entire city blocks into seas of flame. The creatures inside those ships weren't just following orders, they were enjoying the destruction, savoring each moment of terror they inflicted. "Bastards," Commander Hayes muttered, his hands clenching into fists. "They're not even trying to win quickly. They want us to suffer." That was the Karzaki way. Psychological warfare designed to break an enemy's spirit before the real battle began. They had perfected the art of despair, turning each conquest into a masterpiece of calculated cruelty. "Not this time," Sinclair said, her voice carrying a cold fury that made her crew straighten. "Dar. Chen, how long do you need to bring Aegis to full power?" 40 minutes for the initial charge sequence, then another 20 for the exotic matter to reach critical coherence. "An hour total, but Captain, the Karzaki will be in weapons range in 38 minutes, Torres interrupted, consulting his tactical display. Sinclair smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Then we'll have to give them something else to think about first." She turned to her communications officer. "Signal the fleet. All ships are to engage the enemy at maximum range. Conventional weapons only, we need to keep them busy while Aegis charges." The bridge crew exchanged glances. What she was proposing was tantamount to suicide. 36 ships against 300, using standard weapons against an enemy that had proven immune to humanity's conventional arsenal. "Captain," Hayes said quietly, "our ships won't last 20 minutes against their main fleet." "They don't have to," Sinclair replied. "They just have to last long enough for humanity to show the galaxy what we're really capable of when our backs are against the wall." As the fleet moved into attack formation, Sinclair felt the weight of history pressing down on her. This wasn't just another battle, this was the moment when humanity would either prove its right to exist among the stars or be reduced to a footnote in some alien historian's account of conquered species. The Karzaki had made one crucial mistake: they had underestimated the fury of a species fighting for its children's future. They were about to learn why humanity had crawled out of the caves of ancient Earth and spread across the galaxy despite every obstacle the universe could throw at them. In the depths of the Vanguard, exotic matter began to swirl in containment fields that bent space itself, building toward a moment of unleashed power that would either save humanity or destroy everything they held dear. The die was cast. Now they could only wait and see whether human desperation was stronger than alien superiority. ## Chapter 3, The Unleashing of Aegis. The bridge of the Vanguard hummed with barely contained energy as the Aegis weapon reached critical charge. Every light dimmed, every system strained to feed power into humanity's desperate gambit. Captain Sinclair stood before the main screen, watching the Karzaki fleet approach like a swarm of mechanical locusts, their formation perfect, their confidence absolute. "Aegis weapon at 95% capacity," Dr. Chen announced, her voice tight with anticipation and terror. "Exotic matter containment holding steady. Captain, we need to fire within the next 60 seconds, or the containment fields will collapse." Around them, the space battle raged with desperate fury. The human fleet had thrown everything they had at the Karzaki advance guard, their conventional weapons sparking harmlessly off alien shields that seemed to absorb energy like hungry mouths. Already, 8 human ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and debris. "Target acquisition," Sinclair demanded. Lieutenant Torres's hands flew over his console, sweat beading on his forehead. "Locked onto the Devastator, Captain. The flagship is maintaining position at the center of their formation, just like our intelligence predicted. Arrogant bastards think they're untouchable." The Devastator hung in space like a monument to alien superiority, 2 kilometers of angular death bristling with weapons that could crack moons. It had never been damaged in battle, never retreated, never shown the slightest vulnerability. The Karzaki used it as both a command ship and a psychological weapon, its very presence enough to break the will of most enemies. "Aegis at full power," Dr. Chen reported, her voice barely audible over the whine of overloaded systems. "All power from main engines, life support, and defensive systems rerouted to the weapon." "Captain, we're completely defenseless now." Sinclair felt the moment crystallize around her like the eye of a hurricane. Everything humanity had ever been, ever achieved, ever dreamed of accomplishing hung in the balance of the next few seconds. The bridge crew looked to her with expressions that mixed terror and absolute faith. They believed in her, even as they prepared to die. "Fire," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The Aegis weapon discharged with a sound that seemed to come from the fundamental structure of reality itself, a deep, resonant hum that made the ship's hull vibrate like a struck bell. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself tore open. The beam that erupted from the Vanguard wasn't just energy, it was coherent destruction given form, a lance of annihilation that bent light around it and made the stars themselves seem to flicker. It crossed the distance between the human and alien fleets in microseconds, moving faster than the Karzaki sensors could track. The Devastator's shields flared to life, layer upon layer of exotic energy barriers that had deflected the combined firepower of entire human fleets. For a heartbeat, they held. Then the Aegis beam struck them, and the universe screamed. The alien flagship's shields didn't just fail, they imploded, creating a cascade of energy that rippled through the Karzaki formation like a shockwave. The Devastator itself, that monument to alien invincibility, began to come apart as the beam carved through its hull like a hot knife through tissue paper. "Direct hit," Torres shouted, his voice cracking with disbelief. The flagship is breaking apart. On the main screen, the impossible was happening. The Devastator, the ship that had destroyed worlds, was dying. Explosions rippled along its length as critical systems overloaded, its perfect angular form becoming a twisted wreck of superheated metal and escaping atmosphere. But the Aegis beam wasn't finished. It continued through the flagship and into the ships behind it, carving a path of destruction through the heart of the Karzaki formation. Cruisers that had seemed invincible moments before simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to pure energy by forces beyond comprehension. 12 enemy ships destroyed, Hayes reported, his voice filled with awe. Including their flagship. The formation is breaking apart. For the first time in recorded history, the Karzaki fleet was retreating. Ships that had never known defeat were pulling back from the burning wreckage of their command vessel, their perfect coordination shattered by the impossible sight of their greatest weapon being destroyed by what they had considered an inferior species. Dr. Chen was laughing and crying simultaneously, her hands shaking as she monitored the weapon's power levels. It worked. Dear God, it actually worked. The exotic matter cascade exceeded all projections. But Sinclair's expression remained grim. She had seen enough battles to know that wounded enemies were often the most dangerous. What's their status? She demanded. Torres consulted his sensors, his initial elation fading. They're regrouping at the edge of weapons range. Still over 200 ships, Captain. And they're changing their formation. Adapting. The truth hit the bridge like a physical blow. The Karzaki had suffered their first major defeat in centuries, but they were far from finished. If anything, humanity had just demonstrated exactly how dangerous they could be, ensuring that the aliens would never again underestimate human ingenuity. Aegis weapon status? Sinclair asked. Dr. Chen's face fell. The exotic matter is exhausted, Captain. We'd need at least 6 hours to synthesize enough for another shot. And the containment system, it's not designed for repeated use. We're lucky it didn't tear the ship apart. Sinclair nodded grimly. They had played their ace and revealed humanity's greatest secret, but the war was far from over. If anything, they had just ensured that the Karzaki would bring everything they had to bear on the human fleet. The first round had gone to humanity. But the real battle was about to begin. ## Chapter 4, the battle intensifies. The Karzaki response was swift and merciless. What had been an orderly advance became a furious assault as the alien fleet regrouped with terrifying efficiency. The destruction of their flagship had not broken them, it had awakened something primal and savage in their collective consciousness. Enemy fleet is accelerating, Torres reported, his voice tight with renewed fear. They're abandoning their standard formations and moving to surround us. New contacts appearing on sensors, they're decloaking additional ships. Captain Sinclair felt her blood turn to ice. The Karzaki had held reserves in reserve, hidden ships that materialized like ghosts from the darkness of space. What had been 300 vessels was now over 400, and they were moving with the desperate fury of a wounded predator. They're using quantum phase cloaking technology, Dr. Chen observed, her scientific mind still functioning despite the chaos. We never detected them because they were existing slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. The power requirements must be enormous. They've been planning this for months, Commander Hayes realized, his tactical mind putting together the pieces. This wasn't just an attack on the colony, it was a trap designed to draw out our secret weapons. The main screen showed the Karzaki fleet spreading out like the jaws of some cosmic predator, each ship bristling with weapons that had reduced entire civilizations to ash. But there was something different about their movement now, a frantic urgency that spoke of wounded pride and alien rage. Incoming transmission from the enemy fleet, the communications officer announced. Put it through, Sinclair ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was like the sound of grinding metal given speech, each word dripping with cold fury. Humans. You have demonstrated that your species possesses unexpected capabilities. This changes the parameters of our engagement. No longer will we seek to merely conquer you. Now, we will ensure your complete eradication. The transmission cut off, replaced immediately by weapons fire that lit up the darkness like a deadly aurora. The Karzaki weren't just attacking, they were unleashing every weapon in their arsenal simultaneously, turning space into a maze of plasma bolts and energy beams. Evasive maneuvers. Sinclair commanded. All ships, scatter formation. Don't give them concentrated targets. The human fleet exploded into motion, 36 ships dancing between streams of alien death with the desperate grace of dancers performing for their lives. The Vanguard, still power depleted from the Aegis firing, wallowed through space like a wounded giant while smaller ships wove protective patterns around her. The UES Defiant is taking heavy fire. Torres shouted over the din of battle. Her shields are failing. On the screen, Sinclair watched one of her destroyers disappear in a ball of superheated plasma. 37 crew members, gone in an instant, their sacrifice barely slowing the alien advance. Return fire with everything we have, she ordered. Conventional weapons, kinetic rounds, nuclear warheads, I don't care if we have to throw rocks at them. The human response was fierce but futile. Their weapons sparkled harmlessly off Karzaki shields that seemed to adapt to each new form of attack. Worse, the aliens were using tactics that defied comprehension. Ships would appear to be destroyed, only to phase back into reality behind human formations, striking at undefended flanks with devastating precision. Captain. Dr. Chen called out from her station. I'm detecting massive energy buildups across their fleet. They're preparing for a coordinated bombardment that will overwhelm our remaining ships simultaneously. Sinclair felt the weight of inevitable defeat pressing down on her. They had revealed humanity's greatest secret, dealt the aliens their first major defeat in centuries, and still it wasn't enough. The Karzaki were simply too numerous, too advanced, too ruthlessly efficient. But then she heard something that changed everything, a sound that shouldn't have been possible in the vacuum of space, yet somehow carried across the void to reach every human ear, singing. What is that? Hayes asked, his voice filled with wonder. It's the crew of the Prometheus, Torres realized, his instruments picking up the transmission. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. The heavy cruiser Prometheus was dying, her hull split open and bleeding atmosphere into space. But her crew, facing certain death, had begun to sing, not a funeral dirge, but humanity's oldest war song, passed down from the days when their ancestors fought with crude weapons on a distant blue world. The song spread from ship to ship, crew to crew, until the entire human fleet was singing in defiance of extinction. And something impossible began to happen, the Karzaki fleet hesitated. Their coordination is faltering, Dr. Chen reported, her voice filled with amazement. The quantum phase ships are having trouble maintaining their cloak. It's as if our emotional resonance is interfering with their technology. Sinclair understood immediately. The Karzaki were a collective species, their technology based on perfect harmony and coordination. Human emotion, raw, chaotic, unpredictable, was like a virus in their systems, disrupting the very foundations of their superiority. All ships, she commanded, her voice carrying over the singing, give them everything we have. Show them what humanity fights like when we sing our way to hell. The counterattack that followed would be remembered as long as humans sailed between the stars. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting, held together by nothing more than human stubbornness and the refusal to die quietly. The Vanguard, her Aegis weapon spent, rammed through the Karzaki formation like a battering ram, her conventional weapons blazing. The tide was turning, but the cost was terrible. With each passing moment, more human ships fell silent, their songs ending in bursts of light and scattered metal. They were winning, but at a price that might leave humanity too weak to ever threaten the aliens again. The real question was whether courage and determination would be enough when the final reckoning came. Chapter 5, the turning point. The battle had become a maelstrom of fire and fury that lit up the Kepler 186 system like a miniature star. Captain Sinclair gripped her command chair as the Vanguard shuddered under repeated impacts, her hull scored by alien weapons but her fighting spirit unbroken. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, Commander Hayes reported, his voice strained but steady. Engineering reports we've lost 2 of our 3 fusion reactors. We're running on backup power. 22 human ships remain from the original 37. Against all odds, they had managed to destroy nearly 100 Karzaki vessels, but the aliens still outnumbered them 3-1. More importantly, the enemy was adapting with terrifying speed, their weapons becoming more precise, their tactics more ruthless. "Captain," Dr. Chen called out, her face pale with exhaustion and revelation, "I'm detecting something impossible. The Karzaki fleet, it's growing." "What do you mean growing?" Sinclair demanded. "Their largest surviving ships are manufacturing new vessels. Not building them, growing them. Like some kind of mechanical organism reproducing itself." The main screen showed the horrifying truth. The remaining Karzaki dreadnoughts had extended metallic tendrils that were consuming the wreckage of destroyed ships, both human and alien, and using the material to construct new fighters and cruisers. It was technology beyond human comprehension, self-replicating war machines that could replace losses faster than they could be inflicted. "Estimated time until they've replaced their losses?" Sinclair asked, though she dreaded the answer. "At current rate, 18 minutes, Torres replied, his voice hollow. "Captain, we can't win a war of attrition against an enemy that can rebuild itself." The bridge fell silent except for the sounds of distant explosions and the hum of failing systems. They had fought brilliantly, achieved the impossible, and still faced defeat. The Karzaki had revealed their ultimate weapon, not superior firepower, but the ability to turn defeat into victory through sheer persistence. "There is one option, Dr. Chen said quietly, her words cutting through the despair like a knife. "The Aegis weapon, it might be possible to reconfigure it for one final shot." "You said it would take 6 hours to recharge," Hayes pointed out. "Not recharge, reconfigure. Instead of firing outward, we could reverse the polarity and create an implosion effect. Turn the weapon inward and use the Vanguard itself as the exotic matter source." The implications hit the bridge like a physical blow. Dr. Chen was suggesting they turn their ship into a bomb, not just any bomb, but a weapon that would tear a hole in spacetime itself. "What would be the effective radius?" Sinclair asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was being proposed. "Unknown. Theoretical models suggest anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 kilometers. It would certainly destroy the manufacturing ships, and the space-time distortion might disrupt their quantum phase technology permanently." "And us?" Dr. Chen met her captain's eyes with the unflinching honesty of a scientist facing the ultimate equation. "We would be completely annihilated. Not just killed, our matter would be converted to pure energy and scattered across several dimensions. There would be nothing left to bury." Sinclair looked around the bridge at faces she had known for years. These people had followed her through 3 wars, trusted her judgment, believed in her leadership. Now she was about to ask them to make the ultimate sacrifice, not just their lives, but their very existence. "How long do you need?" she asked. 12 minutes to reconfigure the containment fields and reverse the exotic matter flow." "Do it." As Dr. Chen began the modifications that would turn the Vanguard into humanity's funeral pyre, Sinclair opened a communication channel to the remaining human ships. "This is Captain Sinclair to all vessels. We are implementing Protocol Omega. All ships are to retreat to minimum safe distance immediately." "Captain," came the voice of Commander Rodriguez from the cruiser Intrepid, "we're not leaving you behind." "That's an order, Commander. The colony still needs protection, and the fleet needs witnesses to tell humanity what happened here today." "Belay that order," Rodriguez replied, his voice firm with conviction. "We've come this far together. We'll finish it together." One by one, the voices of the surviving human captains came over the communication system, each refusing the order to retreat. They had fought as brothers and sisters in arms, and they would die the same way. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "the Karzaki manufacturing process is accelerating." They've nearly replaced half their losses. On the screen, the alien fleet was transforming before their eyes. New ships emerged from the construction tendrils like metallic flowers blooming in the darkness, their hulls gleaming with weapons designed specifically to counter human tactics. Aegis weapon reconfiguration at 60%, Dr. Chen reported. The exotic matter is becoming increasingly unstable. We need to fire within the next 4 minutes, or the containment failure will destroy us prematurely. As if sensing their desperation, the Karzaki fleet began to close in for the kill. Their movements were different now, more cautious, more calculated. They had learned to respect human ingenuity, but they were determined to ensure that this would be humanity's final lesson. 3 minutes to weapon ready, Dr. Chen announced. 2 minutes until the Karzaki enter effective weapons range, Torres added. Sinclair stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by the men and women who had chosen to die with her rather than live with the shame of abandoning their comrades. In that moment, she understood what it truly meant to be human, not the ability to build great weapons or conquer distant worlds, but the willingness to sacrifice everything for something greater than themselves. Signal the fleet, she commanded. Tell them it's been an honor serving with them. And signal the colony, tell them we kept our promise. As the final seconds ticked away, the bridge crew began to sing again, not the war song this time, but something older and more beautiful, a lullaby that human mothers had sung to their children for thousands of years. The Karzaki were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or tactics, but the simple, stubborn refusal to surrender hope in the face of certain doom. ## Chapter 6, Resolution. The Vanguard died like a star being born in reverse. When Dr. Chen triggered the modified Aegis weapon, reality itself convulsed. Space-time folded inward on itself, creating a gravitational anomaly that pulled matter, energy, and the very fabric of existence into a singularity smaller than an atom yet containing the mass of a small moon. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The Vanguard and her crew of 400 souls simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to pure energy and scattered across dimensions that human science couldn't even name. But their sacrifice accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. The implosion tore through the Karzaki fleet like the wrath of an angry god. The manufacturing ships, caught in the space-time distortion, imploded along with their half-constructed vessels. The quantum phase technology that had made their cloaked ships possible was disrupted so completely that dozens of vessels materialized from their hiding places only to be shredded by gravitational forces beyond comprehension. When the anomaly finally collapsed, taking with it nearly half the remaining alien fleet, the survivors found themselves facing something they had never encountered before: genuine fear. Commander Rodriguez, watching from the bridge of the Intrepid, felt tears streaming down his face as he witnessed the most beautiful and terrible sight in human history. Where the Vanguard had been, a new star blazed in the darkness, not nuclear fire, but the pure light of exotic matter being converted to energy. "My God," he whispered. "They did it." The Karzaki fleet, reduced to fewer than 100 ships and stripped of their technological superiority, began to retreat. For the first time in their species' history, they were running from an enemy that had proven more dangerous than they were. But the humans weren't finished. "All ships," Rodriguez commanded, his voice carrying the fury of a species that had just watched its heroes die, "pursue and destroy. No quarter. No mercy. Make them remember the price of threatening human worlds." What followed was less a battle than an execution. The surviving human ships, only 11 vessels but burning with righteous anger, hunted down the fleeing Karzaki with relentless efficiency. The aliens' perfect coordination was broken, their morale shattered, their technological advantage neutralized by a weapon they couldn't comprehend or counter. 3 hours later, the last Karzaki ship was destroyed in the outer reaches of the system, its crew choosing death over the shame of surrender. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy for decades was finally ended. 6 months later, the memorial service for the crew of the Vanguard was held on Earth, in the great cathedral that had been built to honor humanity's war dead. Representatives from dozens of species attended, paying tribute to the sacrifice that had saved not just the human colony, but potentially every civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, who had replaced Captain Sinclair as humanity's foremost military commander, stood before the assembled crowd and spoke words that would be remembered for centuries. The crew of the Vanguard showed the galaxy what it means to be human. Not our technology, not our weapons, but our willingness to sacrifice everything for those who cannot protect themselves. They proved that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from what we destroy, but from what we preserve. The Aegis weapon technology was never used again. By unanimous vote of the Human Colonial Council, all research was classified permanently, the knowledge sealed away with the understanding that some powers were too terrible to unleash upon the universe. But the memory of the Vanguard lived on. Her name was given to humanity's new flagship, a vessel dedicated not to war but to exploration and peaceful contact with other species. The ship carried a simple inscription on her hull, "For those who sang in the darkness." The galaxy was a safer place because 37 human ships had chosen to stand against overwhelming odds. The Karzaki threat was ended, but more importantly, every civilized species now knew that humanity would fight to the death to protect the innocent. In the end, that knowledge proved more valuable than any weapon ever constructed. As the memorial service concluded and the assembled dignitaries returned to their worlds, they carried with them the story of how a handful of humans had faced extinction and chosen to sing their way into legend. The darkness between the stars seemed a little less threatening now, knowing that somewhere among them, human voices were still singing songs of hope and defiance. The war was over. Humanity had won not through superior firepower, but through the simple, stubborn courage that had carried them from the caves of ancient Earth to the stars themselves. And in the depths of space, where the Vanguard had made her final stand, a new star continued to shine, a beacon of light that would burn for millennia, reminding the galaxy of the day humanity proved that some things are worth dying for. The END in memory of all those who stand watch in the darkness, so that others may live in the light.